Chapter 1. Meeting with the Old Man, revised version. Where am I now and why am I talking to myself? It's quite simple, I'm dead. That's right, what a surprise. I find myself in emptiness, like in typical stories where heroes die and end up somewhere, then meet a god. The most surprising thing is that I ended up here when I expected to go to hell, the place they scare children with. Why was I supposed to go to hell? It's quite simple, I knew how I lived and what awaited me. I probably thought I could find a job there. It's always better than suffering eternal torment. Back to the point, here I am, pondering what to do next. Wait for the Big G or Roba, as they call them, or try to escape to where I'm supposed to go. How did I die? It's quite simple, no truck-kun or heroic saving of women or children from disaster. I died like a typical old man from a heart attack at the age of over 25. How did it happen? It's quite simple. Late-night gaming sessions, energy drinks, and coffee, all led to a heart attack in a young body. And that's how I ended up here. You're quite an interesting young man, may I say. Alexander, well, I think it's quite logical that someone like me should end up in hell rather than getting a chance at reincarnation and such. And why exactly did you decide your place is in hell, not, for example, in heaven? Alexander, I believed in hell and heaven and thought that for one's actions, one should bear punishment. Plus, I thought I could find work in hell. Haha, first time I see someone who wants to find a job in hell. You're truly an interesting kid. Alexander, I guess, thank you. Who are you, old man, god or robe? Neither one, kid. Alexander, so you're the one above all, right? OAA, that's right, and you win a prize. Clap clap clap, bring the prize to the studio, well, actually, to the void. Alexander, you're quite a jovial old man. OAA, I'm not old. Why does everyone I meet think I'm old? Even my two sons think I'm already old. Alexander, blank stare, you do realize you're older than the multiverse that's been around for eons, right? OAA, these are all trivialities, young Alexander. Alexander, and now you're speaking like the Almighty. Sweating profusely. OAA, alright, let's leave all these trivialities and discussions. Now that you've figured out why I'm here, will you choose to be reborn or will you go where your karma dictates for your actions and the life you've lived? Alexander, well, I think only a fool would refuse. So, what can I wish for and what can't I? OAA, you can wish within reason, don't be greedy, young friend. Alexander, then, what's the upper limit of power I can wish for? Can I choose the world I'll go to and change my appearance? OAA, as for power, I think you understand it's not about omnipotence and such. As for the other questions, yes and yes. Alexander, a rather vague answer about power, but okay. Let me think for a couple of minutes and I'll tell you my answer, if that's okay with you. OAA, everything's fine, take your time. Sometime later. Alexander, I think I've decided on the abilities I need. I want all the abilities of Anos Voldigode. OAA, well, those abilities don't contradict what I mentioned earlier. But can you explain why these powers specifically? Alexander, I'm not satisfied with typical main characters who overcome everything with willpower and friendship. I want to be strong and unconditionally dominant, breaking any barriers effortlessly, without getting into blood and dirt. I need power to live on the edge, where I am respected and feared, and where every step I take becomes a challenge for those around me. OAA, so you just don't want to bother. Alexander, exactly. And one last question before you send me to the world I choose. Can I absorb their powers and knowledge here before going on adventures? OAA laughs, you really surprise me, kid. No one has asked to stay to absorb powers before leaving. Well, sure, you can absorb knowledge and powers here. Just let me know when you're ready. Alexander, thank you. And one more thing. Can I get starting weapons, or can I only ask for powers? OAA, what starting weapon do you want, my young friend? But remember, it shouldn't disrupt the balance of the world you're going to. Alexander, the swords Yamato and Beowulf. OAA, well, I think such weapons can be allowed. Why this choice specifically, and not something more exotic like the Gates of Babylon or Solomon's Rings? Alexander, these are my favorite weapon. I like their style. OAA laughs, good choice. Are you ready to begin receiving powers? Alexander, yes, I'm ready. And regarding appearance, before I head to another world with my face and dead fish eyes, I want to look like Anos, but with eyes the color of mystical death perception, not like Satoru's. OAA, noted. Let me know when you're ready to begin. Good, when you absorb the powers and experience, you'll be ready for adventures. And please, name the world you wish to journey to. Alexander, alright, no need to get upset. I'm ready to receive your blessing, O great elder. Don't make it all so bad. Absorbing such a volume of knowledge will be a bit unpleasant, so bear with it for a while. Some time later. Alexander, I must say, it's been quite an interesting experience. Feeling these powers and seeing how I look now. I can say I'm pleased with myself. Well then, are you ready for your adventures, young Alexander? Alexander, yes, I'm ready to journey to another world. I want to go to the world of DanMachi, a year before the main events start. And if possible, I'd like to enter an alternate universe where Belle is a girl. And please, I prefer it to be near Orario. I just don't want to travel too far. Can I also receive a small starting capital so I can afford housing and food until I find a family to join? Of course, that's possible. And don't worry about using weapons and gaining experience. You'll learn all that as soon as you arrive in the other world. So, are you ready? Alexander, yes, I'm ready. And thank you very much for everything you've given me and the opportunity to fully enjoy life. Then I wish you a safe journey, young Alexander, and may luck always be with you. This isn't the Hunger Games, I managed to shout before the portal sucked me in, and all I heard afterward was the laughter of that old man before everything went dark. Some time later. After waking up, I found myself already in the forest. Nearby lay the weapon I had asked for from the old man, and a small pouch of money from this world. If I remember correctly, they are called valis. As for the clothes I was wearing, at first, I thought it would be the standard attire of the power I had chosen. However, it turned out to be clothing similar to Virgil's from DMC, which pleasantly surprised me because I've always liked his style. Now, onto the silliest question I hadn't thought about before asking for the weapon: where do I put it? Maybe I can store it and summon it, like in those games. And it seems to have worked. I practiced a bit with summoning and dismissing the weapon to better understand how it works. Now, the most important moment: how much money did the old man give me? Peeking into the valis pouch, I found a note from the old man with a short message: don't thank me, sometimes we all forget something. Alexander. Ha ha ha, I admit, the old man has a sense of humor. After reading the note and laughing at my own foolishness, I decided to check how much money I received as a starting capital. There were about 1,000,000 valis in the pouch, enough for me to rent a nice room or buy a decent house until I join a god and their family. Well then, I can start my adventures. To be continued. 30 comments 0 vote. Chapter 2. Arrival in Orario and visiting the guild, revised version. First-person view. After deciding to head towards the city, I needed to make initial preparations so that the gods wouldn't sense my demonic blood and demon energy. For this, I required one spell from Anos, Arsenal, the Nars spell. Nars is a fundamental magic spell that masks the origin of magical power. It makes the magical power appear human rather than demonic to everyone around. This spell will help me conceal my aura so that the gods won't attack me as soon as I arrive in the city. Additionally, I need to use another spell, Najira. Najira is a spell that hides the target's magical power. It will help conceal my enormous reserve of magical energy. What annoys me the most right now are the purple eyes of destruction. Now I understand why Satoru always wore a blindfold. The feeling that you can destroy everything with just a glance is simply shocking. I need a small seal for my eyes from Anos's arsenal, and the problem is solved. Now, I can set off for the city. I think I'll take Yamato with me, just in case I encounter something on the way. Some time later. As I approached the city, I realized I had ended up in a fantasy world, because what I was seeing was beyond words. I can only say that it was amazing. Getting closer to the city, I noticed a line for entry consisting of various races, merchants, and adventurers. Why does no author mention in their fantasy books that the queues to these cities are enormous? Thank goodness the old man threw me into this world in the morning and not closer to evening. After waiting in line for a while, it was finally my turn to pass through. A guard stopped me at the gate to ask a few questions. Guard. Young man, where have you come from and what is your purpose in visiting Orario? Me. I came from the Far East to become an adventurer, find a family, and enjoy the adventures. Guard. From the Far East, you say? I don't see any features in you typical of people from the East. Me, ha ha ha, I understand I don't look the part. My family has lived there for generations, though I don't really know where my ancestors originally came from. Unfortunately, I can't find out because I'm the last of my family, so I decided to travel. One day, while traveling with a caravan, people were talking about adventurers and the city of Warario, so I decided to come here to find a place where I can call home. Guard, I sympathize with you, young friend. You must have gone through a lot to get here. Me, thank you. What do I need to do to enter the city and become an adventurer? Guard, to enter the city, you need a document proving your identity, which you can get at the guild. If you don't have one, we can issue a temporary one. You will also have to pay an entry fee of 200 valis. Me, no problem. Do I need to pay extra for the temporary ID? Guard, haha, you're quite the cheerful one. No, it's temporary and will allow you to enter the city and register at the guild. Me, thank you. Could you also tell me how to get to the guild so I can get the ID and possibly find out information about the so-called dungeon? Guard, of course. See that tall tower in the distance? That's the dungeon, and the guild is nearby. They will provide you with the information you need. Me, thanks for your help, and have a good day. First-person perspective. As I walked through the streets of Warario on my way to the guild, I couldn't stop marveling at the fact that I was truly in a fantasy world. Along the way, I saw many different merchants with their stalls, selling all kinds of trinkets and food. Note to self, try the food at these stalls after registering at the guild because some of it looks very appetizing. Alright, enough distractions and growling stomach. First, I need to take care of business, and then I can enjoy the perks of the fantasy world, namely, delicious food. After all, I haven't eaten since my death, ha ha ha. Silly words and puns. Looking around, I noticed people were starting to give me strange looks. I realized I had made a joke and laughed at it myself, apparently out loud. There it was, my first social blunder in the fantasy world. The most important thing now was to maintain a composed face and keep moving toward my goal. And my goal was the guild. First-person perspective. Reaching the guild building and stepping inside, I was greeted by a spacious area. On one side, adventurers were lined up to sell what they had collected in the dungeon. On the other side, it seemed like people were waiting to get information or hand something over to the staff. Regarding this, I wasn't sure if the guild bought information or not. I'd have to clarify that with whoever became my advisor. For now, though, another queue. After waiting in line for a while, I encountered one of the characters from DanMachi, Aina Tool, a half-elf girl who looked after Belcranel. Aina was a kind and gentle half-elf girl, yet quite strict when the situation demanded it. She had a beautiful, slender figure typical of elves, cute long ears, short brown hair, and lovely emerald eyes. Apparently, I stared at her for too long, making her feel uncomfortable. Aina, good day, my name is Aina Tool. How can I help you? Me, I just recently arrived in the city, and the guard at the entrance said I need to get an ID to be able to stay in the city. Aina, I see, you are a newcomer. What brings you to the city? Me, I came to the city to become an adventurer and find a family to enjoy adventures with. Aina, I understand. In that case, you need to fill out a form for the ID, and after you join a family, you will need to fill out a form for adventurers. Me, so, without joining a family, I can't enter the dungeon. Aina, that's correct. Those are the rules after many people who weren't blessed by the gods entered the dungeon and died. Me, I understand, Miss Aina. Then, can you give me the form for the ID? Aina, certainly. While filling out the form, I needed to provide my first and last name, age, and occupation. It was all quite straightforward, though I took some time deciding on what name and age to use. After all, I wasn't going to write that I was just a few hours old. I decided to choose the most optimal age, 18 years, just a couple of years older than Belle. Being a lazy person, I decided to use my old name and surname, Anos, and ended up with a name that even sounded similar, Alexander Voldegod. After completing the form, I handed it to Aina. Me, Miss Aina, I've filled out the form. Can you check if everything is correct so I don't waste the paper? Aina, you filled it out correctly, Voldegod-san. You indicated your age is 18, though I thought you were older. Me, I think, thank you, strange look. Under my strange look, Aina blushed for some reason, although my eyes shouldn't evoke such cute emotions in the opposite sex. Aina, ahem, excuse me, here is your ID, Voldegod-san. If you need any more information, feel free to ask me. Me, thank you, Miss Aina. If possible, could you tell me where I can find information about the families I can join? Aina, of course. You can look through the families of the gods in this book, or are you looking for a specific god you would like to join? Me, I don't have a specific family in mind. I just arrived in the city and want to look around before deciding who to join. Browsing through the so-called family register, I tried to find a certain lowly goddess because I couldn't remember when she arrives. After spending some time, I found who I was looking for, namely Hestia, the goddess of fire and hearth. When people say Hestia gives useless buffs with her blessing, it's not true. There's nothing better than coming home after a hard day to a place where you are awaited. After finding what I was looking for, I decided to return the book to Aina and at the same time find out where I could grab a bite to eat. If it turned out to be the hostess of fertility, even better. Where else could one meet cute maid girls if not at the most significant place in Orario? Me, thank you, Miss Aina. I found what I was looking for. If it's not too much trouble, could you tell me where I can get a good meal? Aina, certainly, Boldegod-san. You can go to the hostess of fertility. They cook very well there, and the portions are quite large, just right for a growing body. Me, then could you point the way for this hungry traveler so he can satisfy his hunger, Miss Advisor? Slightly bowed. Aina, of course, I'll show you. It's my job to help adventurers, after all. Said a slightly blushing Aina as she pointed the way to the restaurant. To be continued. The second chapter is already in progress, and I'm trying to write something with a plot. GreedHunter creators' thoughts. 14 comments 0 vote. Chapter 3. Hostess of the Horn of Abundance and the Lovely Waitresses. After Aina showed me the way to the Mistress of Abundance, we chatted a bit more. I told her that when I become an adventurer, I'll ask her to be my personal consultant. After all, Aina is a meticulous consultant, as the old saying goes, forewarned is forearmed. After bidding farewell to the lovely half-elf Aina, I set out to find a place where I could enjoy a delicious meal and admire the girls dressed as maids. It didn't take long to reach the renowned restaurant, Mistress of Abundance, where I admired the exterior before deciding to enter. My stomach was already protesting, making sounds that clearly indicated its desire for an independent lunch. Without wasting time, I entered the restaurant and was greeted at the entrance by two cat girls. One had chestnut hair, while the other had black hair. If I recall correctly, the one with chestnut hair was Anya Frommel, sister to Alan Frommel of the Freya Familia. The one with black hair was named Chloe Rollo. If I think about it, how could I approach Chloe? I could use the Krazo spell to reduce my age to 12 and let her kidnap me. After all, I don't mind being kidnapped by a beautiful cat girl. Lost in my internal monologue, mesmerized by the cat girl's ears that I endlessly wanted to stroke, I decided it was time to talk to them and ask to be escorted to a place where I could sit down and finally eat. Chloe, Anya. Welcome, visitor NYA. At that moment, I couldn't resist one more foolish act, adding another awkward moment to my adventures in this fantasy world. Me. Hello, maids Nayas. A palpable awkward silence fell over the entire restaurant, as if no one else had anything better to do than turn and look at us. It was then that I realized, here was another social death. But I regret nothing, I've always wanted to do this with cat girls. Noticing the awkward situation, Chloe took the initiative. Chloe, visitor, did you come here to joke around or to eat? Me clearing my throat, I apologize, I'm just meeting cat girls for the first time and was a bit nervous. I'm sorry if that came off as rude. Chloe, everything's fine, visitor, you didn't do anything wrong. Will you need a table for one or are you expecting someone? Me, if it's not too much trouble, I'll take a table for one. I've just arrived in Orario, and after getting my identification, I asked the consultant where I could eat well. She recommended this place, so I came straight here after the guild. Although, maybe someone will join me to eat. Although, there is someone who will eat with me, and that's my stomach. Ha ha ha, and again, my silly puns. I hope I won't get beaten up for them one day, although that's unlikely. Chloe, I see, you're quite a cheerful visitor. Please follow me, I'll show you where you can place your order. Chloe led me to a table where I could sit and place my order. After handing me the menu, she mentioned that once I was ready, a waitress would come by to take my order. As I perused the menu, I felt a couple of curious glances from the other end of the hall. Turning to look, I noticed it was Sir Flover, a beautiful girl with gray eyes and hair of the same shade. Her fair skin and the maid's attire only enhanced her charm. In those fanfics I read, every author described her differently. Some saw her as Freya's avatar, seeking people with beautiful souls for her family. Others told stories of her being a child raised in an orphanage and trained by Freya. But these are all just guesses until I talk to her personally and find out the truth. Lost in admiration of her beauty, I decided to verify which version might be true. I confirmed she definitely wasn't Freya, she lacked that aura inherent to a deity. My gaze clouded with her charm, and I forgot to place my order. My stomach reminded me that I wasn't here to enjoy the beauty of fantasy girls, but to eat. Deciding to place my order, I called over Ryu Lion, one of the waitresses. Ryu, ready to order. Me, I'd like to order, but I'm not sure what to choose. Could you recommend something? Ryu, I can recommend our signature dish. And what would you like to drink? Me, I'd like something cool and sweet, please. Ryu, alright, your order is taken. It'll be ready shortly. Me, thank you. While I waited for my order, I continued observing the waitresses delivering orders and adventurers coming and going. I still felt that strange gaze upon me, and apparently Sir had nothing else to do if she kept looking at me. Smiling and nodding at her, she apparently gathered the courage to approach me. Sil was an intelligent girl, and she seemed to notice a new face and became curious about who I was. Coming up to me, she took a seat at a nearby stool and decided to introduce herself. Sil, hello, peculiar visitor. I see you've recently arrived in this city. Me, it's not very polite to call someone peculiar. But I admit my behavior was unusual. It's my first time meeting a cat girl. And yes, I've recently arrived in Orario. Before this, I was traveling until people in one of the caravans I was on started talking about adventurers and dungeons. So, I decided to come to this city to learn how to live among gods. Oh, and I forgot to introduce myself. My name is Alexander Voldegod, and I come from the Far East. Sil, Voldegod. Quite a strange surname for an Eastern country, although one could say your sword is from the East. Meet smiling, I won't lie, my name confuses many, especially when I say I'm from the East, and this sword has been passed down in my family for generations. Sil, my name is Sil Flovis, I'm a waitress here. What are your impressions after arriving in Orario? Have you decided which familia you want to join? Do you already have a familia in mind that you want to join? Me, my impressions after arriving. I can only say one thing, I'm impressed. As for familia, I'm not sure yet. I think I'll join a small familia and try to make it the strongest in Orario. After all, you always need a goal to strive for. Sil, I see you have ambitions, Voldegod-san. But in Orario, there's the Freya familia with a rank 7 adventurer, and there's also the Loki familia, which is also strong. To make your familia the strongest, you have a long way to go. While I was chatting with Sil, Mia Grande, or as they call her, Mama Mia, noticed this. She was ready to explode, and from the corner of my eye, I noticed her reaching for the cleaver, and I felt she would start throwing soon. Instead of working, Sil was chatting with a client, but at that moment, my savior, Ryu, brought my order and distracted her. Sil noticed this and quietly decided to leave, winking at me at the end. As Sil tried to leave, she accidentally bumped into Ryu, and I couldn't help but notice that despite her grace, Sil moved as if an elephant in a china shop, or it was the so-called author's plot armor. Seeing Ryu fall together with my food, I decided to recreate the famous scene from Spider-Man, where Peter catches Mary Jane. I caught both the food and the beautiful elf girl, realizing life was good, my food was unharmed, and in my arms was my beloved Ryu. Holding her in my arms, I noticed she blushed deeply, while Sil smiled guiltily. If my hands weren't busy, I would have given her a thumbs up for such an opportunity. If Ryu was one of my favorite characters in DanMachi, in my past life. Putting the food on the table and holding Ryu's hand, I decided to make sure everything was okay with her. She was probably ashamed of her actions, but I can say I'm not complaining. I'm very happy. Me, are you okay, miss? Ryu, I'm fine, thank you for your help. Ryu, there's no need to call me miss, it sounds strange, and it looks like I'm older. Meet laughing, I'm sorry, Ryu. You can call me Alexander. Having met Ryu, I started eating and finally understood why everyone praises the food in this restaurant. I can say one thing, the food here is really delicious. While I was enjoying the food and occasionally catching Ryu's fleeting glances, which made her blush and look away, I found it very charming. Another group of newcomers arrived, apparently from the Loki familia. To be continued. 20 comments 0 vote. Pissed. Download the app for additional rewards. More events, more perks. Winning you more free perks. Download now. GreedHunter. Download app now. Chapter 4 The Loki Familia and the Rowdy Dog. While I was enjoying my meal, Loki's family arrived. Another pair of curious eyes began watching me, those of one of the newcomers. When I turned to see who was observing me, I met a pair of beautiful golden eyes belonging to Ice Wallenstein. Ice was a stunning and slender girl with long golden hair. She wore a white dress with blue lines and floral patterns, along with a blue skirt. Honestly, anime doesn't capture how beautiful she truly is. As I observed the newcomers, they noticed me too and couldn't figure out who this new person sitting alone in the restaurant was. Do you know this guy? Riveria asked Ice doubtfully. No, I don't. But he seems strong, although I can't tell what his strength is, Ice replied, shaking her head. Met someone familiar, Ice, Riveria. An Amazon from their group asked. It was Tiona. No, Tiona, we don't know him. But maybe Ice is interested in this newcomer, Riveria replied, continuing to sit at Loki's family table. That can't be. Ace only loves me, right, Ice? Loki protested upon overhearing their conversation. After Loki caused a scene in the restaurant, I decided to take a break from my food and look their way again. Meeting Ice's gaze once more, I nodded slightly at her and resumed enjoying my meal. Loki's family was shocked by my actions. Loki started making a fuss again, but was quickly calmed down by Riveria's swift intervention. What else could you expect from the famous mother, Riveria? This elf girl who could calm down the noisy god was truly worthy of her title. While Loki continued to claim that no one would take Ice away from her, I finished my meal and realized I needed something sweet. There was still room in my stomach for dessert. I beckoned the cute elf girl, Ryu, and when she approached, our eyes met and she blushed. How adorable, I thought to myself as I asked if there was anything sweet I could order. She recommended apple pie and green tea, and I placed my order. After taking my order, she bid farewell and went to deliver it, still blushing. After Ryu left, the catgirl Chloe approached me, starting a conversation. How's the food in our restaurant, visitor NYA? Chloe playfully asked. Maybe let's not dwell on that awkward moment, I replied with an empty stare. Chuckling at my expense, Chloe introduced herself. Being a true gentleman, I decided to give my name as well. As we chatted and exchanged banter, Chloe continued to tease me, adding, NYA, to the end of each sentence, which embarrassed me. This was social death in a fantasy world. I began to think I might have dodged a bullet with my actions, but Chloe clearly didn't think so as she kept teasing me. She had beautiful emerald eyes, short black hair, and ears and tail of the same color. Overcoming my embarrassment, I kept thinking about how to touch those cat ears and tail. Following my gaze, Chloe realized I was looking at her ears. Do you want to touch them? Chloe asked, a slight blush on her face. Shaking my head, I replied, I think it would be rude of me, even if you allowed it. And why is that? She asked, surprised. I think members of your race only allow their life partners to touch their ears and tail, I calmly replied. From what I remember in most books mentioning beast folk races, touching ears and tails is akin to proposing marriage. So, I thought it would be rude, even if you offered. After all, we've only just met. I know you only as a fictional character. But now it's different. You're a living person with your own thoughts and goals. Oh, I see, she responded, surprised by my answer and considering me a pleasant person. After that, our conversation flowed more smoothly. We started getting to know each other. She asked where I was from and why I came to Orario. I told her I came from the east, but after traveling for a long time, I heard about the Dungeons and Adventurers, so I decided to visit this city. After chatting a bit more, Ryu approached with my order, giving Chloe a stern look. Playfully sticking out her tongue, Chloe bid me farewell and went back to work. After saying goodbye to Chloe and thanking Ryu, I started eating my apple pie. Meanwhile, as I enjoyed my pie, Ice continued to watch me. She felt that I was a skilled swordsman but didn't know how to approach and inquire about my strength. As Ice pondered how to approach and learn about the strength of the person who had forgotten everything around and was enjoying pie, Loki's family noticed that she couldn't take her eyes off the new restaurant visitor. Rivria decided to inquire again if we were acquainted. Shaking her head, Ice replied that we weren't acquainted, but she thought the guy at that table was a strong swordsman. Rivria decided to check my magic to sense my strength and was slightly surprised by what her family members had noticed. They asked what she had noticed. Rivria replied that this person's magical signature was strange, as if veiled, and she couldn't make it out. She added that to conceal one's magical level, one must have amazing control over it. After her words, Loki became interested in me but was still unhappy that I had caught Ice's attention. One of the Amazon members of Loki's family also became interested because, from Ice's and Rivria's words, it was clear that I was a skilled swordsman and magic user. While Loki's family members reacted differently to my presence, one of them was displeased. He believed that a newcomer who hadn't even joined any family yet couldn't be taken seriously. Deciding to teach me a lesson and show that veteran adventurers were not to be trifled with, he stood up. When Bet stood up, he drew his family's attention. They understood that he was about to cause trouble again. Some family members shook their heads. Some thought Bet was being foolish, while others watched with interest to see what I was capable of. Loki, with a slightly curious look, seemed interested. If I possessed the strength described by Ice and Rivria, she would consider how to invite me into her family. Betty, who had come to teach me a lesson and put me in my place to show that one shouldn't mess with veteran adventurers, approached the table. He forcefully slammed the table, knocking over the teacup and the pie, which fell to the floor. Before he could say anything, he heard. "You're quite a stupid mutt, aren't you?" After that, he received a blow that sent him flying through the hall, smashing tables. Bet flew out onto the street and lost consciousness. In first-person view. While I enjoyed my delicious pie and cup of tea like a true aristocrat, ignoring my surroundings, I sensed a bit of resentment from Loki's family, but I didn't pay attention, as sweet pie was more important than any strangers. As I savored the pie and contemplated ordering another, someone approached me and overturned my tea and knocked over my pie. Feeling a surge of anger, all I could say at that moment was, "You're quite a stupid mutt, aren't you?" After that, I used the simplest technique from Anos's arsenal, a snap of my fingers to create a shockwave, sending this dog on his first fantasy space program. After the snap, Betty went flying. I didn't want to kill him, it wasn't worth it. But I did feel sorry for the pie. Looking around, I noticed the astonished looks from Loki's family, exaggerated surprise from the restaurant waitresses, and a very angry glare from Mia's mother. I realized that, even though I was the Demon King from another world, I still didn't want to anger this woman. I decided to cast the Revade spell to restore the restaurant to its original state. Revade, a source magic spell that allows local time manipulation. After restoring the restaurant, there was a commotion from witnessing such magic. Loki's family members were most surprised. Their comrade was thrown with just a snap of fingers, but even more astonishing was that I was able to repair all the damage. Ignoring those around me, I was still upset about my pie. Members of Loki's family approached me and decided to start a conversation, presumably to apologize for their comrade's actions. "I offer my apologies on behalf of my family member for causing you such trouble," Finn said apologetically. "No worries. He's already received his due for his actions," I replied, still not taking my eyes off the fallen pie. "If you don't mind, you can join our table, and our family will treat you, thus making up for the inconvenience caused," Finn said, noticing I was still visibly upset about my pie. "Of course, I don't mind, as long as I'm not intruding and your family members don't object," I responded, waving to Ryu to settle the bill for the food I had eaten. After paying 400 valis for the food I consumed and apologizing to Ryu for the inconvenience caused, I heard her reply that it was no big deal, since I had fixed everything. After bidding farewell to Ryu, I asked her to put in a good word with Mia so I wouldn't be barred from enjoying delicious food. Approaching Loki's family table and sitting down, I took a seat next to the elf Rivria, who was staring at me intently. "My name is Finn Diemny, and these are members of my family." Finn cleared his throat and began introducing his family members. He introduced a redhead woman who was his goddess, saying her name was Loki. Looking at her, I could understand why she and Hestia were constantly fighting. All I could say was, "You can stroke clothes on her chest." Seeing my gaze and apparently understanding what I was thinking, she slightly opened her eyes and gave me a wicked smile. Clearing my throat, I decided to listen further. Finn continued to introduce his family members, starting with a gnome named Gareth Landrock. Then he introduced the elf sitting next to me, saying her name was Rivria Leos Elf. After that, he introduced the girl with the blank face, Ice Wallenstein. Next, he introduced the Amazon sisters. One who glared at me was named Tion Hiryut, and the other who smiled at me cheerfully was Tiona Hiryut. He also didn't forget to introduce the young elf who was looking at me cautiously, named Lefia Voridis. Finally, he mentioned the name of the one I launched out of the restaurant, named Bet. After Finn introduced them all, it was my turn to introduce myself. Giving my name, I shared my story of coming from the Far East, traveling extensively, and upon hearing about adventurers and dungeons while traveling with a caravan, I decided to come to this city and become one of them. At that moment, the waitress brought me another apple pie, and without hesitation, I began to eat it. While I was busy enjoying the pie, other family members dragged unconscious Bet and seated him at the table. Riviera could no longer hold back and asked me about the magic I used. At that moment, Tion intervened, wanting to know how I snapped my fingers to launch Bet through the entire hall. Finding the most advantageous answer from my arsenal, I acted as appropriate in this situation. Spreading my arms, forming a rainbow in them, I said that it was magic. Other family members, waiting for my answer, at that moment spat out all the alcohol they were drinking. Loki, with her eyes slightly opened, watched me and asked the quite expected question in this situation. Would you like to join my family? Loki asked, with a slight smile on her face. All the family members awaited my answer. Even Ice, with her expressionless face, was quite interested. I'm sorry, but I can't. I already have a god whose family I want to join, I replied, with a slightly apologetic tone. Then can you tell me which god or goddess you want to join? She asked, with an intrigued expression. Remembering Loki and Hestia's feud like cats and dogs, I decided not to be direct and wriggle out another way. That's a secret. Every man should have one or two secrets to seem more mysterious, I answered, avoiding a situation where Loki could stir up a fuss. After spending some more time with Loki's family, chatting with them and listening to their stories, I realized it was time to leave to find Hestia. Saying goodbye to everyone, I mentioned that I would be glad to meet again. They responded in kind. Exiting, Hostess of Fertility, I used a spell for local search and located Hestia, then set off on my way. To be continued. I revised some parts in the first two chapters, removing the powers of Satoru and Sukuna, as well as Cloud's sword. I decided to keep only Anos's powers and the weapons Yamato and Beowulf. It took me 4 cups of tea and 5 cigarettes to write this chapter, including the fact that I wrote it with a hangover and headache, but I managed. If my headache goes away today, there will be another chapter and a meeting with Hestia. Enjoy reading. GreedHunter Creators Thoughts. 28 comments 0 vote. Chapter 5, Hestia, the Goddess of the Hearth, or How to Meet a Lowly Goddess. Leaving the Hostess of Fertility, and using search magic to find the lowly goddess, I discovered that she was in a small, abandoned church on the outskirts of the city. Setting my goal, I headed towards the small church. I didn't even notice how the day flew by. It was already evening, and the streets of the city were filled with adventurers who had apparently just returned from the dungeon and decided to celebrate a successful raid. Some were having fun, others were sad. Walking through the evening streets of Warario, I observed many people and realized that this was not an anime world, but a real one. Here, people live their lives, they rejoice, they grieve, they go on adventures, they start families. They are all living people with their own lives. As I moved further away from the bustling streets, humming a melody that just popped into my head, I approached the church. Anticipating the meeting with the best goddess, Hestia, or as she's affectionately called, Bestia, I wondered if she would be afraid of me when she saw my race and my status. After all, the magic I possess doesn't even exist in this world. For example, magic that can influence time or resurrection magic. I hope it doesn't show up in my status. Lost in my own thoughts, I didn't notice that I had already reached my destination. Hesitating for just a moment, I decided to enter. Is anyone here? I called out as I entered the church and immediately heard a noise, as if someone was rushing. In an instant, I saw a black-haired rocket shoot out and stand before me so quickly that I was surprised. There, in front of me, stood the goddess Hestia, looking at me with curious eyes, trying to understand why I had come. In her beautiful blue eyes, there was confusion and a small glimmer of hope. She thought I had come to join her family. Did you come to join my family, Stranger-kun? She asked hopefully, her eyes beginning to sparkle with anticipation. Well, I recently arrived in the city, and after visiting the guild, I was told that I need to be part of a god's family to be able to visit the dungeon. When I learned this, I asked the secretary for a registry of gods to understand which family would be worth joining. I replied to the goddess, who grew more excited with every word I said. She probably began to guess that I had come here to become part of her family. But why my family? Unlike other gods, I can't give a worthy blessing that would help enhance an adventurer's combat power, she said in a sad tone. It seemed she had recently left Hephaestus and had already tried to invite someone to her family but was rejected. This sad look made me feel that I had to protect her and make her family powerful so she would never be sad again. There it was, my first goal in this world, to make Hestia's family powerful so she could be proud and boast to her fellow gods. When I was looking through the registry, I saw many gods and what blessings they give, but yours is the best for me. After all, there's nothing better than a place you can return to where you are always awaited. In this world, I don't have a place I could call home, and no people who would wait for me, I replied with a smile on my face. I let her know that her blessing was no less valuable than those of other gods, and only fools wouldn't understand that. Hearing the first part, Hestia was so excited that her pigtails started spinning, and I began to think she might take off and reach the realm of the gods on her own. But when she heard the second part, she became sad, and it was clear from her eyes that she was trying to find the right words to cheer me up. Don't be sad, Stranger-kun. I'll be your family and help you become the best adventurer. I'll give you a home you can return to, she began to say, her pigtails still bouncing with her, trying to make me feel better. Thank you for trying to cheer me up, Hestia, but I'm not sad. Sooner or later, I'll find a place to call home. But thank you anyway, I said to her with a smile. And you don't need to call me, stranger. It makes me feel uncomfortable when someone with your appearance calls me that. My name is Alexander Voldigode, or you can call me Alex, whatever suits you. After all, we're about to become family, I continued, not forgetting to introduce myself. When a girl who looks like Hestia calls you, stranger, it sounds very strange. Then welcome to my family, Alex-kun. Now come on, I'll give you my blessing, Hestia said, pulling me into the church basement where her living quarters were. When we descended into the basement, she started trying to pull off my cloak and the shirt underneath. Hestia, stop. I shouted, and her hands immediately stopped trying to strip me of my upper clothes. Can you explain what this blessing you want to give me is, instead of trying to undress me right after bringing me to the basement? I asked, adjusting the clothes she had almost torn off. All right, and don't say such silly things, as if I'm some bad woman, Hestia pouted, her cheeks turning a bit red and puffing up like a hamster. The blessing that gods give their children is called, Falna. It's what allows adventurers to accumulate experience and become stronger. Once a family member receives Falna, a family insignia appears on their back, and the god who bestowed it can display the status, allowing you to see how much stronger you've become. When an adventurer reaches a certain threshold in their status, they can level up. If you have more questions, ask them quickly and stop wasting time. I need to give you Falna, and we need to celebrate because I finally have my first family member, Hestia said happily, her pigtails still spinning. I began to think that these pigtails had a life of their own, like an animal's tail. Then one last question, how does the Falna of gods affect the status of a family member? I asked, because I wasn't sure about my theory. If I understand correctly, depending on the domain of the god, the family member receives a boost to the corresponding skills, and certain parts of the status increase faster. Hestia thought for a moment and replied, it all depends on the god who grants the Falna. Take my friend Hephaestus, for example. If she grants Falna to a mortal, the skills needed for smithing will develop faster. Now do you understand? If you do, then take off your top, and I'll grant you Falna, Hestia said. It seemed she could no longer wait to have her first family member. As Hestia requested, I took off my top and lay down on the couch. If you could call it a couch, it was essentially a frame of boards with a mattress on top. As I lay there, I thought it might collapse under my weight, and that was before Hestia climbed on. While our main character lay on the couch with his back to Hestia, she climbed on it to perform the Falna granting ritual. The ritual is quite simple. The god granting the Falna needs to just drop their blood on the adventurer's back and recite the incantation to activate the ritual. And voila, you become a member of the god's family. While Alex fought off sleepiness, Hestia completed the ritual and decided to check the status of her new family member. When Hestia saw the status, she couldn't understand what she was seeing. At first, she thought the ritual had failed, but then she checked the other parts and realized it had worked. So why was there such an anomaly in her new family member's status? She couldn't figure it out, having never encountered anything like this before. Setting aside the part with the stats that weren't displayed, she decided to look at the other elements, and what she saw surprised and even scared her. She had never seen skills like these, even among the gods. And when she saw Alex's title, she was completely stunned, then jumped up and started shaking Alex, demanding explanations about his status, what these skills were, and what the title, Demon King from Another World, meant. I woke up to Hestia shaking me, demanding answers and thrusting a piece of paper in my face. Seeing my blank look, she started explaining why she was acting this way, as the status displayed on the sheet was not what she expected to see. Taking the sheet from her, I decided to look at my status and understand why she was so worried. What I saw surprised me a bit. In the part where the numerical value of the stat points should be, there were no numbers, only letters, and in all the categories, it was marked as SSS. It seemed that this was the maximum the status could display. If I understood correctly, even if I advanced to level 2, my stats would remain at SSS rank. However, the status board could display my skills and even the proficiency levels of Yamato and Beowulf. In the title section, it was recorded as, Demon King from Another World, and so much for my secrecy. Deciding to tell Hestia a half-truth, I explained that I had once woken up in the forest without memories, and all I had with me was a sword and battle gauntlets. Summoning Beowulf, I continued the explanation, adding the element of awakening in the forest, further traveling, and arriving in Orario. After spending a few hours telling my story, I asked Hestia if the entire status needed to be provided or just the level and proof that I had become a member of her family. I didn't want the gods interfering with my enjoyment of adventures for now. Hestia assured me that my status was strictly confidential and that I didn't need to worry. With a laugh, I said that we now had a little secret. After laughing for a while longer, we calmed down and started sharing stories of our lives until we fell asleep. The next morning, I woke up on the broken couch with the feeling that someone was lying on top of me. To be continued. I tried to squeeze the maximum out of my aching head and did everything I could, and here it is, the meeting with the best goddess. Enjoy your reading. GreedHunter Creators Thoughts. 20 comments 0 vote. Chapter 6, Officially an Adventurer and Information about the Dungeon. Waking up the next day, quite early in the morning, I was slightly surprised that I hadn't slept longer. Feeling a weight on me, I was astonished to see Hestia drooling on me. Using simple magic to wipe off her drool, I gently stroked her silky hair and reflected on the previous day. Yesterday was full of events. So much happened in one day that it was astonishing. I died, met the one above all, who decided to give me a second chance in another world. Then I arrived in the city, walked around, met various people, including characters who, until yesterday, were considered fictional. I even got into a fight in a fantasy bar. Well, more like threw an idiot out of the restaurant and enjoyed some delicious food in the company of beautiful girls. I met Loki. Now I understand why most authors like her, she's quite fun if she's not trying to deceive you or bother her family members. After lying for a while longer, I decided it was time to wake Hestia because we needed to go to the guild so I could register as an adventurer. Hestia, wake up, I said softly, gently nudging her to wake up. Just a few more minutes, she mumbled incoherently, trying to fall back asleep. Continuing to wake her, I mentioned that we needed to go to the guild, and at those words, her sleepiness vanished instantly. She got up immediately, no longer wanting to sleep. After washing up and getting dressed, we headed to the guild. People say that women take a long time to get ready, it's not true. They get ready quickly if they really need to, so that claim can be considered a half-truth. The goddess and I stepped out onto the main street, where the first stalls were already set up, selling food and other items. I suggested to the lowly goddess that we grab a bite to eat before heading to the guild. From Hestia's face, it was clear she was torn between wanting to get to the guild quickly to boast about finding a family member and wanting to fill her stomach. While she was trying to decide, her stomach made the choice for her, letting out a loud growl that made her face turn red. Pretending not to hear those sounds, judging by her look, if I mentioned it, she would have bitten me instead of the street food. I headed to the nearest stall. It sold Jagamaru-kun, and if I remember correctly from the canon, Hestia worked at this stall to earn extra money for their home, in addition to what Belle brought back from dungeon raids. Paying for 2 Jagamaru-kuns and a couple of drinks, the total came to 120 valis, which was quite cheap for such a tasty morning snack. We decided to eat near the stall and discuss a topic I had forgotten about yesterday due to having a fun and laughter-filled time with Hestia. Hestia, after I register at the guild, I need you to find out how much it would cost to buy the land near the church and restore it, I said, chewing my food and washing it down with lemonade. I need to know specifically how much it will cost because, according to information from Loki's family, the price of an ordinary house is about 800,000 valis. Hestia needs a big house to accommodate new family members in the future. Why do you need this? And why buy the land next to the church? Hestia asked, intrigued. The purchase of the land is to build a mansion, and the restoration of the church is to prepare for the construction of the house. Plus, it's for future family members so they have a place to stay when they join us. You don't think it will be just the two of us, do you? Although I wouldn't mind, we will need to recruit people for raids and guild missions. I'm just one person, I can't handle everything alone, I replied to her question. As Hestia listened to my answer and nodded, confirming that my point of view was correct, her face gradually turned red, and she mumbled something indistinctly. After listening to the end, she understood my point of view and said that after visiting the guild, she would go find out the details. I reminded her to take someone with her so she wouldn't be deceived. Hestia replied that she would take her friend Hephaestus, as Hephaestus is better at this, and since her family is one of the most in demand in Orario, no one would want to cheat her. After finishing breakfast, we headed to the guild. Hestia skipped along joyfully, eager to brag to her friend Hephaestus that she had found a strong child for her family. At the entrance to the guild. Upon reaching the guild, Hestia and I decided to go inside. Despite the early morning, the guild hall was already filling up with adventurers who had come to take a mission or get information. At one of the counters, I noticed the cute half-elf Aina, who was sorting through documents. Sensing someone looking at her, she looked up and noticed me. Seeing Aina looking at me, I waved to her, and she waved back. Before Hestia could start asking questions, I took her hand and led her to the counter. Good morning, Aina, I've come to register as an adventurer, I greeted her and explained why I had come so early in the morning. Good morning to you too, Alexander-san. I see you've also brought goddess Hestia. I'm glad you found a god who accepted you into their family, Aina replied with a polite smile. While we chatted a bit, Hestia began to lose patience, and her ponytail started to levitate. I was beginning to think she was about to go Super Saiyan. Noticing her impatience, I asked Aina for the adventurer registration form. After my words, Aina handed the form to Hestia, and she started filling it out with her help. While Hestia was filling out the form, I asked Aina if she would like to be my personal advisor. After a moment of thought, Aina agreed but warned me that she was a strict teacher and wouldn't let me slack off. I responded with a light laugh and said that I was a good student, as in my past life, I had already written 3 thesis papers by the age of 22. After filling out the form, Hestia handed it to Aina, who congratulated me on becoming an official adventurer. She then asked if I wanted to receive a starter kit for beginners. I declined and showed her my sword. Aina asked another question about the consultation, whether I wanted to start now or the next day. She seemed to think that Hestia and I would go celebrate this event. I replied that I could start now since Hestia had things to do. Before entering a private room, I handed Hestia a pouch of money and a note with the items she needed to buy for the house. She didn't know how much money I had given her and looked at me with a hint of guilt, thinking that I was giving away my last money and that she, as the goddess of the hearth, couldn't take care of her only child. Noticing her look, I told her how much I had given her, and her blue eyes sparkled. She was likely already fantasizing about a luxurious bed and soft linens. Before she ran off shopping, I told her that if the cost of restoration was within the budget, she should immediately hire a crew to start repairing the church. Nodding like a chicken pecking at grain, she saluted and ran off with thoughts of a soft bed. Meanwhile, at Hephaestus's workshop. While our protagonist was, seriously, listening to a lecture about the dungeon, Hestia ran into Hephaestus's workshop, bursting in with a cry of joy. Hephaestus, listen, I finally found a child for my family. Hestia shouted joyfully as she entered the workshop. Hestia, how many times have I told you not to barge in while I'm working? Congratulations on finally finding your first child for your family, Hephaestus congratulated her best friend. But you didn't come here just to brag about your child. And let me tell you right away, I won't be making free weapons for your child, and I won't give a discount either, even if you're my best friend, she added, continuing to hammer at the metal. My child doesn't need your weapon. He has his own. Besides bragging about finding a strong child, I came to you with a request, Hestia replied, proudly puffing out her chest. Hephaestus put down her hammer and looked at Hestia with doubt. What kind of weapon did Hestia's child have that she would refuse a weapon crafted by Hephaestus, the god of blacksmithing? Putting this question aside, she decided to find out what Hestia's request was. With a wave of her hand, Hephaestus indicated that Hestia could continue. My child asked me to check the items on this list and to take someone with me so I wouldn't be cheated, Hestia said, handing over the paper and pouting, thinking that Alex Kuhn considered her irresponsible. Hephaestus took the list, looked it over, and, raising her eyes to Hestia, understood why Hestia's child asked her to bring someone responsible. Hestia could indeed be cheated if she wasn't careful, and knowing her friend, she would definitely be deceived. Placing a hand on her forehead, Hephaestus began to think about whether to agree or not. Noticing that her best friend was about to refuse, Hestia did the only thing she could. She ran up to Hephaestus and started tugging on her arm, behaving like a child, pleading with her to go along so she wouldn't be cheated. Hephaestus, accustomed to Hestia's behavior, looked at her and sighed, deciding to help her friend after all. She said she would assist in this situation but wouldn't lend any money. Hestia pouted and mentioned that her child had already given her money for some items. With a raised eyebrow of doubt, Hephaestus asked how much money was given. Proudly puffing her chest, Hestia stated the amount and explained that her child had been saving up to buy a house in the future, but since becoming an adventurer, he decided to repair the place where they lived. Hephaestus, upon hearing this, noted that the child Hestia had found could be considered responsible, and she hoped that this child wouldn't spoil her. After changing into casual clothes, Hephaestus and Hestia headed to their first destination. After Hestia ran off to her friend, I followed Aina into the private consultation room. Once seated, Aina poured me some tea and asked what I wanted to know about the dungeon. I explained that I needed information on monsters from floors 1 to 18. Upon hearing this, Aina became annoyed and said that as a novice, it was too early for me to know all that information. I should at least reach level 2 first. Calmly, I clarified that I just needed the information and wasn't planning to go to those floors right away, though who could stop me? After some argument, Aina relented and asked me to swear that I wouldn't go to higher floors until I was stronger. Seeing her concerned and caring eyes, I could only agree, crossing my fingers behind my back. Once I returned from those floors, she would see that I was capable, and hopefully wouldn't worry so much. Aina then spent several hours explaining the dungeon's structure to me in detail. She covered everything thoroughly, which was almost putting me to sleep. Seeing my distraction, she asked me a question. I see you're bored, and you seem to have remembered everything. Can you tell me which monsters are on floors 1 to 5? She asked in the tone of a strict teacher. The monsters on floors 1 to 5 are kobolds, goblins, and underground lizards. Items that drop from them are kobold claws and goblin fangs, I replied to her question. Aina relaxed and continued to describe the dungeon's structure and what the floors looked like. Gathering information, I was satisfied. Now I had a rough idea of which monsters to target to earn money faster for building the house. Realizing it was late, I told Aina I had to leave, or Hestia would worry. Checking the time, Aina realized it was time to go. She reminded me not to forget the information she provided, as it could save my life. I showed her my recording spell, which surprised her, and assured her that I would always have the information with me. Leaving the office, I noticed Hestia had just arrived. She entered the guild hall and immediately rushed over to share what she had learned today. Before she could start talking, I suggested discussing everything over dinner, and she agreed. We began to make our way out. After saying goodbye to Aina, we left the guild and headed to a place where we could eat well, of course, mistress of abundance. To be continued. I think it's time to call it a day, and this is already the 3rd chapter today. I just wanted to get to the dungeon faster than I deserved the headache, but I regret nothing. GreedHunter creators' thoughts. 5 comments 0 vote.